Okay, first and foremost, there's Cinnamon. He's here hanging, eating cute. Anyway, um, my apologies for I feel like I kind of abandoned you. I posted announcements about the stuff going on with my mom. I am hoping that you have been reading the announcements. Um, I had promised that if nothing else, I was going to at least get you set up for the essay questions for your test. So that's the entire reason for this. I'm not doing share screen or anything. I am just going to discuss. Okay. I have one essay question from each of the 7 chapters that are covered on exam one. You will also need to know your matching for all 7 chapters. And you had access to those in the extra quizzes. You have not had access to the essay questions. And I had hoped to do a better presentation, but I'm kind of running out of time and I don't want to leave you hanging. So here you go. From chapter 1, it was kind of a catch-all kind of thing. If you remember, chapter 1 was week 1. We did not meet. It was all on video. And I kind of blew through chapter 1 because it was more like a highlights reel for the whole textbook. But I did pick something from there because I think it's an important one. And that is, what is the main difference between the testimony given by an expert witness and that given by a lay witness? We talked about this when we had class. So I'm hoping you recall. Um, the main difference is an expert literally is trained in that. A lay witness means they are not an expert. The best example I can give that lives in my brain currently is the person who is quote unquote in charge of our health for the country is not an expert in medical or science at all. So, what he says is the healthiest thing for us is not really the same as what an expert would say. If you ask a medical doctor or someone who is trained in health, they are not going to tell you to drink full fat milk, raw milk, have as much full fat as possible, use beef tallow, and eat as much red meat as you can. That is a very bad thing for the body to do. But the person who is in charge has stated this. Just because somebody states it and truly believes it, if they don't have the education, they are not educated in it, they are not an expert. That's pretty much it. So, the lay witness or the ordinary person can give testimony that they think and they feel, and they might even have their own form of logic on why they believe it is so. But that's not as compelling or as authentic as somebody who has an actual education in the topic. For crime scene stuff, you could say that, somebody, I don't know, saw blood splatter all over the place and they're like, I've watched a whole lot of shows and the spray pattern clearly must mean dot dot dot, but they're going on just what they think. A blood spatter analyst has spent a long time learning it. They know what cast off is, what arterial spray is, and stuff like that. So the expert witness can express their personal opinion as to the science and evidence in the question. The layperson can't because theirs is legit just opinion and there's no evidence or education there. I hope I didn't totally confuse you. All right. The next one is, describe the steps the scene investigation team takes during its final survey of a scene. Well, we did cover this in class, I recall, because I kept talking about, when you first came in and things like that. So the basic thing here is the team has to look over everything, just, like a visual overview, take a good look, take an inventory of everything that was collected, all of the evidence, because you need to also make sure nothing is missed, nothing is left behind. You have to then get all of the equipment out of there. You have to verify that any threats to health or safety at the scene have been or will be dealt with properly. We talked about this when we talked about the different zones, because sometimes stuff might be hazardous to your health. So the steps the scene investigation team takes in its final survey of the scene is a visual overview, inventory of all of the evidence collected. They do this to make sure nothing is lost or left behind. So it's kind of like that double, triple, quadruple check thing. Get all of the equipment out of there and verify that any kind of threat to health has been tackled. All right. Chapter 3, we covered the photography aspect. So chapter 3, the essay question, is to name 2 advantages that DSLR cameras have over point and shoot cameras. What additional advantage do digital DSLR cameras have over digital point and shoot cameras? We totally talked about this because I even showed you stuff on your phone how to do this stuff. So I know you should be good on this. Basically, the DSLR camera has where you can swap out the lenses. We talked ad nauseum about different lenses, but you can swap out the lenses, the flashes, the filters. You can decide what you're focused on. You can control every aspect of it. It lets the person taking the picture manually select the f-stop, the shutter speed, and everything else. So that means you can control the depth of field, what you're focused on, how close, how far, that kind of thing. Digital DSLRs also have the advantage of a large microchip, so then it can produce better images, print quality than the point and shoot digital cameras. Sorry. That spot was driving me nuts. It was killing me. Anyway, this one goes to when I was talking about a better quality. You can zoom in, but like if you look at pictures you took with your phone a couple of years ago and then you try to zoom in and it gets all pixelated, and you look at ones that you've taken with a current phone and zoom in, you'll see you can get a lot closer. So that's what this is talking about. The larger microchip holds things at a higher resolution so you can get more detail. All right. That was what? Chapter 3? I forgot to write it down. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So number 4. List and discuss the roles of the evidence collector at a scene. I wonder if that's supposed to be collected. Anyway, list and discuss the roles of the evidence collector at a scene. Well, you're going to have, this is one of those where it might vary. I would make sure to mention things like, and yes, it should be collector. So the person who is collecting the evidence. Handle the physical evidence in the way that minimizes damage or contamination, keeping eye track of the cross-contamination so you avoid that. Remember, we talked about the importance of changing your gloves like a million times, and then we talked about like having your sandwich made at Subway or Publix and watching that. So that's one of the things. Determining and utilizing the proper packaging material for evidence. So the evidence collector has to make sure whatever is collected is put in the proper container. It is not a one size fits all kind of thing. We talked about different types of containers. Maintaining the chain of custody by using proper labeling and documentation methods for collected evidence. Well, yeah. So everything's documented. We need to know this person spotted this one closed this one passed it off to this person, this one passed it off to that person. Because if you remember, we kept talking in class about the importance of chain of command and making sure that you're covered for in case, I'm trying to remember how I worded it. I think I said something along the lines of you have to look at absolutely everything as possible court. And chain of custody is a big one for there. And then also they need to collect the substrate and reference control specimens at the scene. Um, this is going to fall under, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about like footprints and tire tracks and documenting it with photographs before you do a cast, because once you do a cast, it's going to damage what was there. Then there's also taking the samples of the soil and the different things there in order to test that. And so basically, the evidence collector has to make sure they collect everything. Don't mess it up. Don't cross contaminate. Put it in the proper container, that kind of thing. All right. So that was 4. So number 5. Name 3 forensic databases and describe the type of information stored in each. So, chapter 5, 6, and 7. We did not cover these. I did not do the video lecture. You do have the textbook and you do have the PowerPoints, and hopefully you did the quizzes. I do apologize for not covering these. I really wanted to, especially chapter 6. Really wanted to cover chapter 6, but I feel it's a little too late now. And so I am legit just worried about these essay questions. So for chapter 5, name 3 forensic databases and describe the type of information stored in each. Some of these you should already know just from hearing them. I was about to say through osmosis from like TV shows. I think most people have heard of CODIS, but I'm going to start with Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, IAFIS. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a national fingerprint and criminal history system maintained by the FBI. So you've presumably watched or heard about people getting booked for a crime and they do the little fingerprint thing and then it goes into a system and it lives there. That way, anywhere moving forward, they can run it through the bank to see if the fingerprints match. So that's what that is. Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, IAFIS. Then we have CODIS, CODIS. That is Combined DNA Index System. It stores DNA profiles. That's pretty much why I just really think everybody's heard of that one, just because I've watched a lot of crime shows and they always talk about CODIS, Combined DNA Index System. This is what stores the DNA profiles. Then we have National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. That is NIBIN. Again, National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. This is the one that has records of the markings made by firearms on bullets and cartridge casings recovered from scenes. We talked a little bit about the bullet markings, but I can't remember if that was during chapter 1 overall or if that was in class. But that's what this one is. Then we have the PDQ database. Doesn't stand for what I always hear PDQ for. This is International Forensic Automotive Paint Data Query. So PDQ, Automotive Paint Data Query. I should just say Paint Data Query. This is where it's going to do exactly what that part sounds like. It contains the chemical and color information about original automotive paints. Because if you have something like a hit and run, the paint left behind at the scene to the layperson might just look like red paint. But to a professional, they scoop it, they run it through the spectrometer. I want to say there's another one that starts with a C. My brain's blanking on the word. But anyway, they run it through the machine, gives you the exact chemical breakdown, which shows you the exact brand, for lack of a better phrase. And then that can be linked to very specific makes and models. And it can help. So that is the International Forensic Automotive Paint Data Query Database. All right. Then we have the Shoe Print Image Capture and Retrieval, SICAR, SICAR. And again, what do you think? It has to do with shoe prints. So this is going to be the shoe sole database that includes thousands of different sole patterns from more than 300 shoe manufacturers. Because when they do a cast, they are not only looking for the size, they're looking for the type of shoe. because that also helps narrow it down. But they are also looking for the size and how far it goes, because that can also give you a clue or point you in the right direction for height and weight, which I think is kind of cool. All right. And then we have number 6. And I'm probably going to say something wrong. Like I'm probably going to mispronounce. Explain the difference between autolysis, although I think it's like, oh, I don't know. I just say autolysis because auto for self, lysis, split, and putrefaction. Putrefaction. There we go. See, I knew I was going to mess something up. What are the processes dependent on, or what are these processes dependent on? So this is a two-parter. You have to explain the difference between autolysis and putrefaction. And then you also have to talk about the processes that these depend on. So you should include things like the autolysis. Fundamentally, self-digestion by the cell's own enzymes varies from organ to organ depending on the mechanism of death, because the enzyme contact of the respective organs, the position of the body, and environmental factors. So again, auto is self, lysis is breakdown. So autolysis is the self-digestion of the cell's own enzyme. So this is the natural process of how each of the things are breaking down. Putrefaction, I keep trying to turn it into a different word. Putrefaction, decomposition carried out by the microorganisms such as bacteria. So the rate of this is dependent on, for example, mechanism of death, factors following bacteria to spread from the bowel, presence or absence of infection, environmental temperatures, humidity, degree of obesity, and extent of clothing. So putrefaction is the decomposition carried out by the microorganisms such as bacteria. Autolysis, self-digestion by the cell's own enzymes. Okay. And finally, the essay question for chapter 7. What is the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning? This one I think is super important. Deductive reasoning involves using general premise to form a specific conclusion. The conclusions reached via deductive reasoning cannot be incorrect if the premises are true. And I understand that's confusing. Give me a moment. Inductive reasoning involves starting from specific premises and forming a general conclusion. I'm trying to think. I'm like legit reading straight from the text for that one. How can I better break this down? Deductive reasoning, you have the general premise and you have to use that to get a specific conclusion. It is not possible for it to be incorrect if the premise is true. So this would be something along the lines of, and I'm not just doing crime scene stuff on this one. I'm trying to think more general. So if I said that, oh, cinnamon just took off. If I said that, no, that's not going to work. I was about to do one of those P then Q things. And I was going to say something about men and women are both human, and they are. And so that premise is true. So deductive reasoning would be that a woman is human or a man is human. So if this is correct, if your premise is correct, what you have deduced from that has to be correct. Crime scene wise. You find a dead body in an apartment, and there has been much autolysis and putrefaction underneath the body. The body had been obese, it had been warm, and it's been laying there a while, and there's a puddle. So deductive reasoning, by looking at this, you would have the general premise, this person expired in this location and has been there for a while. that would mean that premise, your deduction would be true because your premise is true. Uh, Gosh, I know I got that all mixed up. Anyway, inductive reasoning starts from a specific premise and forming a general conclusion. So, not a specific conclusion, a general. So, deductive, general premise from a specific conclusion or to form a specific conclusion. So, deductive reasoning, general premise to specific conclusion. Inductive reasoning, specific premise to form a general conclusion. I hope that works. My phone is ringing and I'm like distracted because I thought I had to make sure it was not a hospital. So there we go. Anyway, those are the 7 essay questions on the exam. I hope I didn't confuse you too much because, like I said, it's been a heck of a week and my brain is not firing on all cylinders, but I didn't want to leave you hanging. So, I guess that's it.